I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
Why, you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder.
This means something.
Chiang! I am Locutus of Borg.
I must not fear, and fear is the mind killer.
Get away from her, you
Nerd! Nerd!
I'm Matt Kressel.
And I'm David Mercurio Rivera.
And
this is
Nerd Count. All right, welcome to another episode of Nerd Count. I'm losing track. Do you remember what number this is?
We are so far down the path of nerddom.
It's got to be like 806.
We've devolved into, I don't know what's below a nerd, but
it's number 10. It's number 10. So today we have a very special episode for everyone. What everybody is talking about, we're going to talk about AI, specifically writing in AI. We got a lot to talk about, but before we jump into that, what are you watching, Dave? Are you watching anything good?
Well, I saw Gladiator 2 over the weekend, and I thought it was actually well executed. It was,
Yeah.
kind of reminded me of the first one, epic and lots of predictable battles, but still fun to watch.
Yeah.
But I thought it was, again, well executed. There could be some Oscar bait performances in there. Denzel was great. Um, and so yeah, I thought it was. I give it a thumbs up. I thought it was very solid. And in thinking about Gladiator 2, it reminded me of the Dune Prophecy series that I know we talked
Really?
previously. Only in the sense that it's epic storytelling. And I thought that in Gladiator 2, within the first 10 minutes, we're given two point of view characters to latch onto and root for.
Mm.
And thinking about that, I wonder how they were able to pull that off so deftly compared to Dune Prophecy, which in my opinion did not, after a full hour, I
Yeah.
still was not invested emotionally in any characters. Well, how was episode 2? Did you watch that yet?
Yeah, I don't want to say too much to because I know you haven't seen it, but I did watch episode 2. I thought it was much better paced. I thought the pacing was better, and they started to go into the characters a little bit more.
Mhm.
But it's some of the problems I had, which is not a spoiler. It's supposed to be 10,000 years before the events of the Dune books and the Dune movies, and it's everything's the same. Like they have the same houses, the same political structures, the land's rad, like the great houses, the spacing guild, all that stuff is still there, which just seems strange to me because if you think about, and a lot of the tech is the same too. And if you think about, 10,000 years ago to where we are now, like, you know, I posted about this today on social media. Like 15 years ago, we didn't have social media. 40 years ago, we didn't have the internet. 100 years ago, we didn't have, air travel. 1,000 years ago, we didn't even know, like we thought that, the Earth, was the center of the universe. So the idea that 10,000 years pass and everything is the same just felt very, very cheap to me. It felt like a cheap
Yeah.
way to
You know,
to to build a story without building a story.
that's always the drawback whenever you do a prequel, is
Yeah,
dealing with technology. I mean, we see it in the Star Trek prequels,
yeah,
where their technology by necessity has to be more advanced than the original series, just because otherwise it looks ridiculous. So it's always you're always somewhat hamstrung if you do prequels. I'm not a fan of prequels for that, among other reasons. I don't like the fact that a lot of times in prequels, you're boxed in on outcomes, just outcomes for your story because
yeah.
it's, you know.
I mean, it wasn't the technology that bothered me as much, although they did like they're literally stealing scenes from the book. Like I'm like, come on, we saw this in the book. You don't need to do the same exact scene. But just like the fact that the names of the houses are the same, like there's still Harkonnens and Atreides.
Mm,
10,000 years before, this is same families, same houses. I don't know. It's hard for me to like the longest human civilization. that we know of, I think, is the Egyptians, which is about 3,000 years. And even then, the cultures changed over time. Like, it wasn't a stagnant thing. It wasn't just one fat family of pharaohs. It was, all these different places that it was just anyway. Um, I'm still gonna watch it because I love Dune. And yeah, and then at your recommendation, we watched Disclaimer.
Ah, okay. On Apple
Yeah.
TV, yeah.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really well directed and well done.
Hmm.
Don't want to spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but there was one conceit. Like a lot of times you hear in stories, like if the characters were to just tell the other person the truth or tell them what they're thinking, then the whole story, well, like it won't happen. Then all the drama won't happen. It's all predicated on someone just not telling someone else something that happened. And I was like, I suspended my disbelief because I found the story interesting enough to keep watching, but yeah, it's still much better than most things on TV at this point. I recommend it.
Yeah,
Disclaimer.
that's a fair criticism. Yeah, you're right. That a simple conversation probably would have resulted in the series not taking place. It would have been it would
Right.
have been
But then you
resolved
don't have a
within
series. But
five
then,
years, 5 minutes.
right.
But I did think that they created reasons for that conversation not to take place
Right.
that
They tried
I
to.
sort of bought into. I sort of bought
Yeah.
into it. But
But
I thought it was very high quality production, great performances,
yeah.
especially by, I thought Kevin Kline was phenomenal. As the
Wait, is Kevin Kline American?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
He is, right? Because his British accent was pretty good.
Hmm.
Um, I watch a lot of British TV, and I kept forgetting that he was
Yeah.
American.
Yeah, you know who else was great in the show? Sacha Baron Cohen.
Right, right. Borat, yeah.
Borat playing a serious role. He
Playing
totally,
like a nebbishy dad, like this kind of
yeah.
uh quiet, I don't want to say introverted, but just kind of a little timid, which was very, very
He
dip.
sold me. He totally sold me. I thought he did a
Oh,
phenomenal.
he
Yeah.
sold me. He's a good actor. Yeah, he's a good actor. Super brilliant man as well.
Yeah.
Um, but we should get on to our topic because we got a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So I found this very timely. I mean, it's kind of hard to go through a day without seeing something about AI in the news. And today the big thing on that I saw someone linked to on Facebook was that there was this startup company that was doing um, some kind of hybrid AI model for authors where you give them your, unpublished manuscript and they have AI proofread and copy edit and go through the production process and basically this is copy from their website or from the article, shorten the production time from 18 months to 2 weeks or something like that.
Mm.
Um, the whole thing just seems rather fishy to me for reasons that we'll get into. Um, but I think we should maybe start off by laying the groundwork uh, of like what's going on. So, you know, you you
Yeah,
kind of have to.
I was going to say, Matt, that a lot of I mean, when I think of this, when I think of, and we've talked about this in previous podcasts, is when somebody comes up to you and they say, I have a great idea for a story or for a novel, and I'll give you the idea. Why don't you write it, and then we'll split the proceeds. And and there's an impression out there among many people, the majority of people, I would say, that writing is all about just coming up with a good idea. And once you have that idea, there's not much more left. The rest of it is just it's just mechanics. Somebody sits down and writes sentences, and
Yeah, I mean,
it's a
yeah,
fundamental misapprehension of the creative process.
I 100% agree. And, you know, like a lot of people think that they can string a sentence together. Maybe they write emails all day. Maybe they're writing nonfiction all day. Maybe they're a tech writer or they're an attorney or I'm just trying to think of jobs where you're doing a lot of writing and they
Hmm.
think, oh, I have this idea, so then I can easily translate that into words. And then, that's just as you said, that's just the documentation of it. It's not actually the bulk of the work. My father is writing a novel. He's 85 years old. God bless him. He's writing a novel, and it's I don't know
Good
how
for
many
him.
words it is. It's 200,000 words at this point. And then I was telling him, I said, I'm editing my novel. I said, my publisher wants me to cut out like 15,000 words. Like, oh, that must be terrible. That must be horrible. And I said, I go, writing is editing. Editing is writing. Like that, there is no difference for me. I feel like, the process of going back and constantly refining the words to find the optimal way to express something, that is the act of writing. And it just seems
Mm.
weird to me that someone would turn that over to essentially a machine. So, you know, I feel that you cannot call yourself a writer if you use AI to generate a text any more than, you know, like we're hiring some people right now to do some renovation on an apartment, and there's plumbers coming in or there's carpenters coming in. If I say to the plumber, move that, build me a bookshelf, right? I can't then turn around and say, excuse me, I should say, a carpenter builds me the bookshelf. I cannot then turn around and say, you know, I built the bookshelf. I'm a carpenter. No, you're not. You told someone to do it and then they did it. So it's the same way with AI. It's like, you put a prompt into a thing, into a box, write me a science fiction novel with X, Y, and Z, and then it spits out, a 5,000 word short story. Um, you're not an author. You didn't do that. And then to then take that work and submit it as if it's your own, your creation is not only false, it's plagiarism. Because like if you go to a college and they say, write me an essay on, John Adams. And instead of writing it, you get one of your frat buddies to give you his paper from 5 years ago, and you turn that in. That's plagiarism. You didn't write it. And it's the same thing with AI. Like you're submitting work as if it's your own, and you didn't write it. That's plagiarism. I
What
don't know.
if
What do
you,
you?
what if you, I could see somebody arguing, well, what if you tell your carpenter, these are the parameters within which I want you to, this is the type of bookshelf I want you to make for me. It's got to look like this. It's got to have this style. I want it to have this, and you give them specific directions, and then the carpenter makes the bookshelf for you. Is that situation any different than the situation where you just say, build me a bookshelf? I don't think it is.
Well,
I think it's just a matter of degree. But a lot of people will rationalize using the AI by saying, well, I gave the AI detailed parameters, detailed instructions on what I wanted it to write. So therefore, there's nothing wrong with that. How would you respond to
so
that?
so so Ted Chiang talks about this. He
Mhm.
says that I believe it was an essay in the New Yorker where when you create a work of fiction, you're making thousands and thousands of choices. So if it's a 5,000 word story, at the bare minimum, you're making 5,000 choices, right? Probably many more than that, but at least 5,000. Um, if you're directing the AI to do this and that, you're still not making as many choices as you would had you written the story yourself. So number one, you're still not creating every word. Many of those choices were made without you.
Mhm.
So then it's no longer your creation anymore. The other thing I will say to that is that if you're willing to put in the time to continually refine the AI and do all the work to say, no, I want, this character to be, more heroic and I want this scene to come before that scene. If you're willing to do all the little, details to make it perfect, why not then just write the story yourself? Like
Yeah,
why have a machine do it for you? Um, it seems to me to take away the very act of creation from a human being, and then it's like it's no longer art, right? It's no longer,
yeah.
yeah.
You
I
know,
mean,
that's, I mean, it's a really good point that there's so many decisions that go into each word you choose to write a story. You know, forget about, the point of which character's point of view do you choose to tell a story from? Should it be first person or third person or omniscient? Where do you start the story? And then once you even get that, once you reach that minimal, make those minimal decisions, then you have to, again, each word that you choose is an act of creation, and making your sentences, putting your paragraphs together, um, and deciding where the story goes. Now, I'm just imagining a future, Matt, where 100 years from now, writers look back at this podcast and they say, "Boy, how naive those guys were." I mean, look, everybody. I mean, why wouldn't you use the AI to create the kind of the foundation to a story? Sort of like building a house. The drudge work, pouring the cement, creating the foundation is, you don't want to have to do that yourself. So you have the AI create the foundation of the story, and then you go in and you revise it. You examine each word one at a time, and you revise it, and you give it your own voice, and you avoid a lot of that menial work. Now, I don't know if this analogy applies. I'm just thinking of, is there an argument to be made that the AI can create some foundation that you can then work from?
I know for a fact that in 100 years there's going to be very, very different opinions on this stuff, that we're going to sound like old codgers. Um, but the way I think of it is like, you know, in Star Trek, for example, they have the holodeck, and what do they call them? They're like hollow stories or hollow books or something. I forget the exact term they use, but like people will write these stories in the holodeck, but it's clearly AI driven because they're like, put a bed over there, but like the the thing about words, the thing about literature is like it feels very disingenuous to have a machine do it because like the one thing that really separates us from animals is our ability to communicate, is our ability, the best way I think that I know of to communicate to another human being is through words.
Mhm.
And when you have a machine do it, the machine is doing an interpretation of it. So it's like it really is an extremely advanced autocomplete. It's taking, what it thinks the next word should be, but you know, it doesn't have an intuitive understanding of the world. It's not a conscious agent moving through the world. So it doesn't know context. It doesn't know subtlety. So, my fear is like if you give up all of that human uniqueness, and I'm not trying to be romantic when I say human unique. I'm literally talking about all my life experience. When
Mhm.
I give up that and have a machine do that for me, a machine that doesn't have my life experience, that hasn't gone through all the things that I've gone through, it's not going to be able to include all of those subtle things, those subtle nuances that make that make not only a story interesting, but make it real. And I'll just give you one more example. There was a recent study, I think it was out of Apple, that they basically gave an AI a math problem. And, they discovered AIs are actually pretty good at solving math problems. But then what they did was they added superfluous information. They said,
Mhm.
what if, you know, we're adding A plus C plus, whatever, and the person in the background was wearing a red shirt, basically they were very easily able to confuse the AI with superfluous information. They discovered that as soon as they added this, the AI did, like its scores dropped way down in terms of the ability to solve the problem. It got confused. So it's like this is just like a simple math problem that a human would easily realize, oh, that's irrelevant information. I'm going to ignore that, where an AI couldn't. And the thing about a novel or even a short story is you're doing hundreds, maybe thousands of these callbacks and references. Even if you're only doing 15 or 20 or 50, you know, the AI is not going to be able to replicate that in any capacity, at least at the present time. Maybe in the future it will. And I just feel like that's why, you know, AI generated stories, as Sheila Williams of Asimov's and Neil Clark of Clark's World have said very vocally that they're terrible. They're in general terrible.
Right, right,
Pure AI driven. There may
right.
be
And
hybrid things.
yeah, we probably should mention that something that we're familiar with because we're, steeped in all of the gossip, industry gossip, is the fact that Clark's World was the victim of a tidal wave of AI generated stories,
Yeah.
and they had to dig their way through all those AI created stories to just clear their box, and it created a huge burden on them. I guess there was somewhere out there, was it on YouTube or some
Yeah, it was a YouTube influencer from a
recommending
non-USA country. Yeah.
it was recommending to writers that they simply, press a button and generate a story and submit it to Clark's World. So it's definitely not something, I feel terrible for Neil Clark that he had to deal with that. And I know he's put in some measures to protect himself that he hasn't specified what they are, but measures to protect himself from that in the future. Um, but yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I think that those individual choices um, are distinctly human, and if an AI, and if you're gonna go in and review every word choice that the AI makes, then in effect you might as well just do it yourself. You're not really gaining anything if you have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of beginning writers might be tempted to use AI because they're going to be like, well, I don't trust my own voice enough. I'm
Mhm.
still a novice, and the AI is going to quote smooth over my work or refine things. And I want to just say that this is absolutely a terrible thing. Okay. First of all, you're never going to learn if you have the AI do that for you. Like part of the process of growing as a writer is sucking. You're going to suck at first. You're going to try to do something that's going to be terrible. But by writing something terrible, then you learn. Then you slowly get better. Then you slowly realize how, nobody's perfect. The first time Jimi Hendrix picked up a guitar, he was a terrible guitarist. The first time Michael Jordan picked up a basketball, he couldn't sink a ball. You know, People get better. Yeah, some people have innate talent, but um, you know, you're going to suck at first. So the fear is, oh, I'll just have AI do it. But then if you have AI do it, you're never going to learn.
Right.
The other thing too, I just want to say before I forget my thought, is like the AI could smooth over your unique voice. So we have a friend, Devin, who comes from Indiana, and he uses the past tense of drag, like to drag something, as drug. I drug. So if he writes a story like I drug him through the mud, if like that's the first sentence of the story, immediately I'm in like a certain vernacular. I get the I- you know I already have images coming to my mind, whereas the AI is going to come back in and say, well, this is incorrect, I'm going to change this to I dragged him through the mud, which is like, okay, that's grammatically correct, but the voice is gone. The
Right.
unique voice is gone. And that's just a very overt example, but there's probably other examples that you're not conscious of, that you're constantly um it comes out in your writing, in your prose, like your own unique voice that the AI is just going to erase.
Yeah. I mean, uniform, grammatically clean writing is not necessarily what you're driving for when you're writing a short story, writing any piece of fiction. You may be driving to that, trying to achieve that, in maybe a corporate setting where you're drafting an email or a memo in a corporate setting, and there I can see some argument at least for to use AI to smooth over in that circumstance, but only then, even then in that circumstance, I would recommend, very careful validation of anything that an AI produces, even in a work environment. But yeah, but in fiction, you don't want that. So you don't want everybody to sound the same in their writing. So
Editors
yeah,
are looking for unique voices. Editors want a voice, they're reading, hundreds or thousands of stories a month. They've seen it all before. Like the best thing you can do is retain your voice and have that unique voice. And if you try to smooth it out through AI, like, oh, even if English isn't your first language, I
yeah,
still think you shouldn't use AI.
right, right, right. But and by the way, I will mention something here. And speaking of the corporate environment, I used to work at a very large commercial bank, and specifically, I worked in an area writing policies for the bank. And I know that at the time that I left, they were looking into using AI. They were studying it, and they had different work streams examining whether they could be used to draft bank policies. And what they found was they could show a regulation, financial regulation to the AI, and within 30 seconds, it would simply generate a policy on how to follow that regulation. Um, but even then, it required real careful human validation.
Yeah,
Because oftentimes the AIs quote unquote hallucinate, and
yeah.
it would create policies that would address address requirements that were not necessarily in the regulation. Maybe they should have been.
Mm,
Maybe they should have been in the regulation. But the AI was deciding that the policy was going to address non-existent requirements because sense. So again, you have to have human intervention. But I do fear that in that environment that there's going to be a drastic reduction in the workforce ultimately. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it's all very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, regarding the hallucination issue, first of all, it's a euphemism because they don't want to admit that it's basically wrong, right? It's um it's wrong and it's lying and that Apple study I think showed that they could be wrong up to 10% of the time. I mean, would you trust a doctor that was wrong 10% of the time? Would you trust a lawyer that was wrong 10% of the time? I mean, you want someone who's going to be right 99.9% of the time.
I know, and,
Um,
and and yet I did read an article recently about how AI is better at diagnosing illnesses than human doctors, and that it has a higher success rate in that
yeah,
regard. So I don't know. Again, I don't know.
I think there's legitimate uses for it. Like I know that astronomers are using an AI to look at data. I think recently they just, you know, archaeologists were looking at they discovered new Nazca lines using AI. You know, I'm not like everyone's like, "Oh, you're the anti-AI guy." And I'm like, I'm not necessarily against AI use in society, but I have a real problem with it being used for art and artistic things, at least in the way that it's currently used. That my feelings on this may change in the future. Um, and one of my peeves about it is this idea that, you know, I've had it argued to me like, oh, well, humans read a lot of books to get inspired by. Isn't that what AI is doing by scanning the internet and reading all this fiction and nonfiction and whatnot to learn? Isn't that the same thing? And it's like, no, it's the difference between, a human being who can run a marathon and a rocket that can go to the moon. I mean, they're qualitatively different things. And, an AI can hoover up thousands of books in an hour, whereas a human, it would take you years to read that many, and you would never catch up in a lifetime. And a lot of what's going on is theft. So, you know, the what's happening is the creators of these AI tools are going around the internet and they're assuming, they're making the assumption, or maybe they know it and they're doing it anyway, but they're basically like sucking up all the data off the internet, whether it's copyrighted or not, um, and using that to train their models. So then you go to the AI and you ask it to spit out an image or to spit out a novel or to revise your resume or whatever you're using it for. Like that AI was trained off of other people's data, but those people never got any kind of remuneration from that. So they're basically taking all this stuff without permission. And we call that theft. When one party is gaining in a transaction and the other party's not even aware that it's happening, that's what we call theft. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah,
I was
and
gonna, I
that's
was
what,
gonna, I was gonna say, Matt, but just playing devil's advocate here.
yeah.
Could one argue that, well, it's not really, it's an aggregation of all of that other work that's out there on the internet. And in the process of aggregating all that information, in effect, it's creating something new in the process. And that's what it's giving you. It's not giving you individual sentences, although maybe it might be. I don't know how it works. But is there an argument that by aggregating all of this other work, it's in the process creating something new?
Well, it,
Again,
it it might be creating something new, but I don't think that's my argument. I think my
mhm,
argument is um that the data that is used to train these AIs is essentially stolen.
right.
So you know, but I've heard the counter arguments like, well, I can go to a website and I'll give you an example. I can go to Clark's Magazine right now and I
Mhm,
can read a short story and I didn't pay a penny for it. But my response would be, but you did pay. You just didn't realize it. Like, number one, okay, Clark's World, Neil Clark has to pay for the hosting of that site. He
mhm,
had to pay the author for that. So what you're getting back from that is you go to that site, the author is presumably getting some kind of exposure, right? Because they want their work to be out there and read, and maybe they have a book coming out, or maybe they just want people to read their work. But also Neil has ads on the site, right? So he's selling other books and he's got other things that he's selling. He's selling, you know, uh, you know, trade paperbacks of past issues of Clark's World and other books. And, he's got a Patreon that he wants people to subscribe to, hey, it's free, but you could pay me, $5 a month and support me and keep good fiction like this going.
right,
So there's an exchange of value there, right?
right. Hmm.
And there's definitely a cost. There's a cost to him, and there's a cost, and you viewing it, maybe you're not actually pulling out your wallet and giving him money every time you visit the site, but you are definitely paying in some capacity. But when the AI hoovers up this data to train its thing, there's like there's no mutual transaction there. It's just all one-sided. It's all the AI just sucking it and not giving anything back. And that to me is theft. So, it's I think it's different from your argument about whether or not AI can generate something new.
Right, right.
Um,
And then, and in fact, aren't there? I think there's still are there pending lawsuits? I know that there have been
mhm. A
copyright
lot of
litigation
them,
has been commenced against these AI
yeah.
companies.
I think a lot of them have been dismissed. I'm not super up on them.
Hmm.
And I think it's very, very difficult to figure out exactly, you know, what data was used to create the output, right? Because these systems are, the data is large and complex. And, I think it's a little bit of magic. I think the power of some of these tools to quote unquote understand um prompts is surprised a lot of people.
Right,
So I don't think that, like, a lot right now it's a bit of a black box. So
right,
it's very, very hard for them. And I honestly don't think that they're working too hard to figure it out, because here's the thing, if they figure out that, like, oh, I used 0.01% of Matt's story and 0.07% of Dave's story and et cetera, et cetera. Like, what are they going to do? Are they going to pay us all fractions of a penny every time they use our story? And if they did, they would never survive. Like the model, the business model just doesn't work. It only works if they're able to train for free, if they're able to get their training data for free. Now, there are exceptions to this. There are, like, I know um Adobe, according to them, like their AI generated images only train on licensed images.
Hmm.
So I mean, I'm sorry, I mean the AI generator in Photoshop is theoretically only trained on licensed images. Again, you know, I like there's a certain point where I find that it's really kind of weird and creepy when you're turning over your creative power, which is like one of the things that I think separates us from the animals.
Yeah,
Um, it's like I
I know.
don't know. Yeah.
It's disturbing because, of all the things to use AI for, all of its possible applications, why the heck would you want to apply to the arts? Whereas you say we express our humanity. I mean, it just makes no sense whatsoever. And back to some one of our podcasts when we interviewed, I think it was Jason Sanford, who coined the
Mm,
term discovery writing. He explained that when he's in the very process of writing and sitting down and writing helps generate ideas and inspiration as he goes sentence to sentence. He discovers who his characters are. He discovers what the plot is, and so to give that up, that's just a crying shame. To just say, well, I'll push a button, and so before we started this podcast, Matt, I went online and just said, I just typed in, AI write novels. A site came up. It said all you need to do is plug in a title and a 20-word prompt. You can make it more detailed, a 20-word prompt, and you press a button, and you can have a bestseller. I'm dubious, but a bestseller at your fingertips. And so the more thorough the description, the more it can shape the direction of the work, um, reducing the need for editing later on. But um, that's not the way it works. Even when you're writing a commercial thriller, your choices on the word level matter and creates the suspense and the tension, all the things that make that genre successful. Um, so yeah, it's
I
interesting.
guarantee it's not going to be a bestseller. Um, Number one, I
Yeah.
guarantee it. You might generate like there are certain genres that are very formulaic.
Hmm.
I don't read a lot of romance, but I understand from people that do that a lot of them follow similar plots.
Hmm.
And but even then, I'm still skeptical that an AI would be able to do as good a job as a human. Um, but it just gets to this weird place where it's like I personally have no interest in reading an AI generated story. Like I I'm interested in the human experience, even if it's fictionalized, because it's someone's unique perspective on the world that's not my own. And, I might learn something about other human beings
Right.
and something that I can then apply to my own life. Um, that's maybe not what everyone reads for. Maybe people read for just pure entertainment and escapism. Um, and they would be perfectly happy with an AI generated novel that hits all their buttons. But that's not something that I have any desire to read.
No, me neither. Me neither. And my fear is that because the AI works the way it does by kind of scraping the internet, that what you're going to be getting is an average. Like, here's an average sentence, and here's an
Yeah.
average character, and here's an average plot. You're not going to get anything exceptional. out of it is my bet. Um, so I know that Clark's World and other markets have now they've now implemented a an affirmation whenever you go to submit a story.
Yeah.
Typically says that you have not used. This is your system, isn't it, man? Moksha, the Moksha system.
Well, yeah, Clarksville uses a different system, but we implemented it as well.
Okay,
So yeah, it's an affirmation that, well, it's an optional affirmation that publishers can turn on or off, which basically says, I did not use AI, whether whole or in part, to generate this text.
right.
Because, I'm not the only one, you're not the only one who feels this way. I think a lot of people feel this way.
Hmm.
And, you know, yeah, there's the threat aspect. I'm not gonna lie. There is a threat. It's like this is art. It's not my bread and butter. I don't make a living off of this, but it's something that I really, really enjoy doing, and I enjoy reading work of others.
Hmm.
And it just seems to me really grotesque to try to just give that up. It's like it's something that just feels so um essential to what makes us human beings.
Yeah.
The earliest humans, like as soon as you get Homo sapiens, and even before that, with like Neanderthals and Denisovians and all, like they're making art. Like that's the first thing that that there's culture, that there's humans. It's the first thing that they do, and it's like
Yeah.
we reach this point of our technological evolution where we're like, okay. That's the first thing we want to automate. That's the first thing we want to automate. Well, how about automating my laundry? You know, how about automating the cleaning of my apartment?
Yeah.
How about automating my taxes? I'll do that. I'll get behind that. But you go after art, you go
Of all
after
things.
fiction and visual arts and music. Why is that the first thing? And I think the answer is because because it's easy, because so much of it out there is free.
Right.
And you know it's you know art is hard. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard, right? So like in kindergarten, right, we all go to art class and for an hour, and they're like, take out a piece of paper and some crayons, and let's draw a circle, let's draw a try, you know what I mean? Like art doesn't have to be fancy or whatever, but um each kid in that moment, they're having so much fun. They're creating, they're pulling up something out of nothing, and it's the most beautiful experience. And like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it just
Yeah. There was
seems,
there
yeah,
was a commercial. I think Ted Chiang mentioned this in his article that there was a commercial that aired during the Super Bowl of a little kid sitting in his father's lap and writing a fan letter to a sports star saying how much he's a fan. And the AI wrote the little note for the kid. And apparently there was a huge backlash from viewers in the audience to this whole idea that the little child would use an AI to write that note because the value of the note comes from the fact that it's a heartfelt expression from the kid, and that's where the value comes from, not from the syntax or whether the sentence is beautifully constructed or
right.
it's the fact that it's human. So I thought that was very interesting. I didn't see the commercial myself, but I guess they stopped using it.
Yeah, I
But
didn't see it. I didn't see it either. There's I do remember hearing the talk about it.
yeah, um, but yeah, I like the idea of automating the drudge work, the true drudge work, not the arts, for goodness
Yeah.
sakes. You know what? And the other reason why people want to use AI for the arts is because people aspire to be writers and artists. A lot of times, it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of skill,
Yeah.
and it's a shortcut. Let's just,
Yeah,
use the AI.
that's what I was getting at, is
Yeah.
is yeah, it's a shortcut. Like, to become a really good artist takes a lot of work,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of people, I think we're in a particularly pivotal point in society where it's like nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody wants to do the hard work. And I think that laziness has probably been with us, since Paleolithic, but um, I feel like it's really gotten to the point where everybody wants uh, to be the quote unquote success, but doesn't want to put the work in.
Right. That's absolutely true. And trust us when we say it's a lot. It's a lot of work. And a lot of times I actually feel like I'm suffering when I'm producing some, a piece of fiction. But the end product is so satisfying, after you do all that work to see what you've created. And I don't think it would be the same thing if I pressed a button and this average piece of writing came out.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. Um,
Yeah, there's a certain satisfaction to doing it yourself, and you're gonna rob yourself of that satisfaction if you have someone else do it. I mean, it's the same thing as if, you have someone ghostwrite a book for you, and then everyone's like, "Oh, you're such a great writer. That was so wonderful. That was so great." Well, you didn't write it. That's not your story. It's someone else's story. And some people are perfectly happy with taking the credit for that.
right.
But you were talking about the affirmation for
Yeah,
publishers.
right.
One thing that we should also mention is that some publishers will ban you forever if you lie. Like if you're like, nope, this isn't AI, and they find out it is, you'll get banned forever. And the publishing world is a small world. It may seem large from the outside, but it's really not. And if you get a bad reputation and one of them bans you for using AI, you're probably going to have a rough time selling your story elsewhere or getting people to trust you after that it's not AI.
Right.
And yeah,
Oh boy, that's true. So, what else you got on AI, Matt? You know what? I said this is what I suggest. I suggest you and I sit down and we collaborate on a story about like real AI, not these large language models. What do you say?
maybe there's like this AI that's living underground on the moon, and it's so
Love it.
dangerous that
I
everybody
love
has
it.
to, yeah,
And what do you say that they have to like psychoanalyze the AI?
they
Wouldn't
psychoanalyze the AI, right? And it's so dangerous that they can only psychoanalyze the AI for 30 minutes at a time. Otherwise, it's too dangerous and they have to pull them out.
Wow, I love it. All right, let's do that.
Let's do that.
Okay.
We're talking about a story that David and I wrote called Threat Assessment, and it's coming out in. I guess we could announce it now, right? I mean,
I don't know. I mean,
Matt,
we don't have the
yeah,
contract yet, but we've gotten the copy edits. So
we've gotten the copy edits,
I think
and we've
so.
spoken to the publisher directly. So yeah, the story is called Threat Assessment, and it's going to be in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction
Woohoo.
in the next issue, whenever that comes out.
That's right. It's actually
So
it's a novella, so
yeah.
it's long, and it was all human sweat that created the story. But we're very excited about that. It's one of those markets I've been shooting for a while, so it's great to finally pages.
Yeah, actually have a story coming out in Asimov's in the next issue, which should be out any day now, next week or two.
Wow,
And
you have a double whammy. That's impressive.
yeah, it's kind of weird, it's what happens is it all sort of bunches up because like, these stories were written like in vastly different times. I think you and I wrote Threat Assessment, what, 3 years ago or more?
Yeah, I
And
think so.
and then, the Asimov's one I wrote a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago.
Hmm.
So it's just weird, and then they all kind of bunch up. But
Yeah, well, your Asimov story is phenomenal too. It's about a space elevator, a space elevator that's being shut down because it's become outdated, and
yeah,
it's a poignant story told from the folks who operated that space elevator. So it's a real good read.
thanks. Yeah, it's coming out soon. But You and I are on a panel that Asimov's is hosting, right, about AI.
That's right. This December 11th, I think.
It's December 11th. It's
Mhm.
the ninth annual City Tech Science Fiction Symposium on SF, artificial intelligence, and generative AI. And it's
Yeah.
being held at the CUNY, City College of Technology, the academic building on Tuesday, December 10th. The event, well, the it's a whole day of events from 9 to 5, but I believe our event is at 2 p.m.
Okay.
Which will be interesting. So we'll be talking more about AI and stuff like that. I mean, I like that you're playing devil's advocate a bit
Yeah.
with the AI stuff because like I don't want to be a grouchy old man. Uh my wife says you're a grouchy middle-aged man, but yes. So I know I want to like be open-minded, right? I want to be open to having my views changed. But I still feel that no matter how good AI gets, I'm not interested in reading stories generated by a machine unless that machine has some kind of unique, personal, independent experience. Like
Right.
if it's telling me like, I was um, created in this lab. And then, the first time I opened my eyes to the world, and this is how I felt. Like, if an AI started telling me its experience, what it was like to be a sentient machine, I'd absolutely read that. But I don't want to read someone's like, put three prompts into a chat GPT and spit out some text. I don't want to read that. That's not interesting to me. That I have zero interest
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. And it's almost sad. It would almost be sad, wouldn't it, if AI was capable of generating, masterpieces of art. Um, because again, that's what makes us. That's what, one of the perhaps the most essential thing that makes us all human. And
Yeah.
it's a scary concept that AI could just come in and just steal that away from us. And I want to make sure that my thought process is not driven by that fear, and that I'm looking at it just objectively. Uh,
Well,
but
we got to
you know,
make sure that we don't get stuck in like the pre-Copernican mentality of the Earth is the center of the universe, that, you know, every so often science comes along and says, hey, humans are not the center of the universe and our role in this universe keeps getting pushed
yeah,
aside or smaller, let's say. And
yeah,
so, it could be that, AI one day is going to be not just make something as good as humans, but better. Um, I still don't know if I want to read that. Like, unless it's about its particular experience and not just some, you know, simulacra. Like why would I want to read a simulation of a thing when I can read the actual thing, if that makes sense?
no, it does make sense. What if it was able to, by, again, by scouring the internet, reading all these other human experiences that are relayed in other novels, that it's able to somehow generate an experience that to us would seem like a human experience that we could relate to and that, well, we'd want to read about. I mean,
I'd still be scared. I still wouldn't want to read it because I don't think that at the moment, I don't believe that AI is sentient, and I don't believe that the human experience that it's relating is based on actual feelings, that
yeah,
it's faking feelings. And, when when humans fake feelings, like we can fake feelings in fiction, and we can fake feelings, like actors can fake feelings on a screen.
hmm,
But the best ones, it's are coming from a real place. Like when you read about a character suffering, uh, the best authors I feel that write about suffering are ones that have suffered themselves.
right.
And, the best actors, the ones that are able to really get you to empathize with them, probably have suffered in similar ways or are able to call up those emotions when they're acting and it feels real.
Right.
Maybe the AI is going to get good enough to do that, but again, it's like um it's an illusion. It's like smoke and mirrors and um
Yeah.
I think that people are gonna it's probably gonna move into some weird hybrid space. Like I could see a lot of Hollywood being like, you know,
Sadly, yes, I can see it in Hollywood for sure because that's what they're trying to do without the AI right now is they simply look at old formulas and they just try to rehash them and you have, part six of a series of a franchise that just repeats the same story that you've seen the previous five movies. So yeah, I could absolutely see Hollywood using AI to create Drek and then, make try to make money off of it.
yeah, and I think unfortunately a lot of that mentality has has worked its way into the fiction market, like you said earlier, with instant bestseller, which is like the Hollywood version, the literature version of the Hollywood's, instant blockbuster, right?
Right.
It's like here's all the cliches you need to hit in order to have a blockbuster book.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, so I don't know. I mean, like I
even
think
Matt, even for example, I was thinking, can we use AI just to copy edit? You finish your story, and I want to make sure I want the AI to review it for copy editing purposes.
I
Now
still wouldn't do it.
think about it. We just received copy edits on our novella, and the
Yeah.
copy edits that we received went way beyond just word choice or typos or anything like that. It was some of the edits asked questions about logic. They asked about the emotional responses of our characters in certain situations. I don't know if I don't. I'm pretty sure that an AI can't provide those types of edits. Um, and if you're just going to use
Definitely
it
not.
for spell check, I would use it for spell check, but we already have spell check. So
Yeah, I don't consider spell check AI.
no.
But like it could be like, oh, the I mean even grammatical checks, like sometimes I don't want the comma to be there. I don't, that's the other thing. Like, I don't know about you, but every time I go on YouTube, I get an ad for Grammarly. It's some
Yes, I do.
Gen Z kid trying to be like, I use Grammarly for blah blah blah, and it makes my term paper writing so much better, and it's so much better for work and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, God, you don't realize that like the most effective power a human being can have is communication. And if you're turning that power over to a machine to do it for you, your skill at communicating is going to atrophy. And I think that's generally bad for humanity as a whole when we become poorer communicators.
Amen. I agree with you.
Yeah. But
All right. Well, I think that we've run out of curmudgeonly things to say about,
yeah,
about AI. But look, like AI is here. It's going to
yeah.
become part of the fabric of our society and change our world in ways we probably even haven't even thought of yet. Um, but as we said earlier, gosh, for the idea that it would go straight for the arts is scary and disappointing.
So what if you're an aspiring author, what advice would you give them in regards to AI if you they were sitting in a room with you right now?
I would say absolutely stay away from it right now. I mean, you develop your writing muscles. Sit down, write, and write bad things, and get rejected, and write then improve them, and then you have to make it on your own merits, and there are no secret shortcuts. Um, that's the advice I would give them. And you know what? If there were a shortcut, if you could just steal your way to success, I think that would be kind of an empty exercise. So don't do it.
Yeah. I think I agree 100%. I don't think I can add any more to what you said there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, don't let it destroy your unique voice. That's all I would say. Um, but
All right. Well, I'm gonna go work on the points for our upcoming AI seminar. I'm gonna use AI to generate some talking points
you're
because
gonna
that's
get okay. That sounds good. Yeah.
all
All
right.
right. So we should do our farewell sign off.
All right.
Uh, all right. So here we go. Three, two, one. Farewell,
Farewell,
nerds.
nerds.
All right. See you in the next episode. You have been listening to the Nerd Count Podcast. That's our show. But if you want more shows, check us out at nerdcountpodcast.com or your favorite podcasting site. See you next time.
Get those nerds!